Welcome back to Shit Creek Survivors, where we believe one thing. We all have a Shit Creek story, and this is where you get to hear them. Today, we're talking with Terry McCarty. Terry was burned at just 6 years old, suffering burns over 70% of his body. But that's only the beginning of his story. At 25, Terry became a firefighter. Along the way, he faced bullying, identity struggles, loss, and a long-term battle with depression before finding his way from victim to survivor to thriver. Terry's story is about more than surviving a horrific accident. It's about rebuilding your identity, finding your self-worth, and learning how to move forward when life takes you somewhere you never expected to go. This is Terry's Shit Creek. Let's get into it. Terry, thank you so much for being here on Shit Creek Survivors. If you would introduce yourself to our audience, let us know a little bit about you.
Yeah. Well, hey, thank you so much for having me on. Yeah, as you were saying, my name is Terry. And I'm a burn survivor. I've actually been a burn survivor for the better part of 33 years now. I was a burn survivor at the age of 6. But in that 33 years, I've done quite a bit of amazing different things. I've done not just surviving the accident, but I've done everything from firefighting to deep sea commercial diving training.
Wow.
I also do a lot of volunteer for summer camp at the same summer camp that I went to as a burn survivor as a kid.
Very cool.
Well, yeah. And,
Yeah.
I just kind of live life now in the terms of trying to use what has happened to me to try and help other people.
Well, that's amazing. Thank you for your service, because that takes a lot to kind of turn back around and try to help the next person. That we're trying to do that with every attempt. But yeah, I'm so blessed to have you on. Your story is so amazing. I mean, just out of the gates, the idea, and I know you're going to go more into your story and all that kind of stuff. But what stood out to me is burn victim at 6 years old turns firefighter at 25. I mean, come on, man. Like, that's amazing. So if you could if you don't mind, actually, would you tell us kind of what happened when you were young? Is that okay to go into? Okay.
Yeah, most certainly. So my story, it really starts in 1992. I was living with my dad. He was a single father, and I was living with my 2 older brothers at the same time. We lived in a tiny little town called Hawthorne, Nevada.
Okay.
And Hawthorne is so small that if you blink while you're driving through it, you're going to miss, most of the town.
Yeah.
How small it was. One evening, my dad asked me to go out and find my 2 older brothers who were 10 and 13 at the time, and to bring them home for dinner because it was getting a little bit late at night. They were out walking the neighbor's dog, and the neighbor was out on vacation. And so the first place I went was the neighbor's house where the dog lived. And I actually found my brothers there. But they were actually in the carport on the side of the house, which for those that don't know, carport's like a garage. It just doesn't have any walls around it, right? But they were at the back side of the carport, and they hadn't noticed me yet. But when they were kind of hovering over a bowl, but it looked like a dog bowl to me. And they were bending over with a lighter in their hand, and I had no idea what was going on. But as soon as the lighter touched that bowl, the whole thing exploded. What I didn't know is that they had found an unmarked can of kerosene while they were out walking the dog.
Okay.
And they were in their firebug stage. So they were curious about, if it was flammable, if it was how flammable it would be, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's why they filled the bowl full of this, and they tried to light it on fire. Well, when it flashed over, it scared them, obviously, right? And so they kicked the bowl as quickly as they could. But what they didn't realize is that they kicked it in my direction. They didn't know I was standing on the other side of the carport. So when they kicked it, for me, I didn't know what was going on. And, at 6 years old, I didn't really know what fire safety was, let alone the situation that I was in, right?
Right.
But the bowl, it flew directly at me, and it actually hit me in the chest, and the whole content of the bowl itself actually wrapped around me like a wet blanket.
Wow.
And for the first few seconds, I seriously thought everything around me was on fire. I didn't realize that I was in the middle of that fire.
Yeah.
But of course, with kerosene, it's a thicker fuel, right? So it burns a little bit longer than, say, gasoline does. And so it took a few seconds, but when those few seconds finally came up, uh, the pain kicked in, the confusion kicked in, like every sensory outlet completely just haywire. But in that moment, the very first thing that kicked into gear for me was the training that they gave us in school right before we left school that year for summer was to stop, drop, and roll.
Yeah.
That was the very first thing that came to mind. So I stopped, dropped, and rolled. But of course, with it being kerosene, that's not something you roll out of. So I got up, I tried to do a handful of different things, but of course, just the confusion and everything that was going on, there wasn't really anything else that I could think of doing. I'm in the middle of Nevada at the end of summertime. At the end of the day, everything there's nothing to really help my situation. Well, about that time where I was about to give up, the neighbor had just come home and he had a sleeping bag that was in the back of his truck, and he grabbed it and he ran over and he tackled me with that sleeping bag. And that is actually what put my fire out for me. From the moment that they lit that bowl until the neighbor showed up, it was about 2 minutes that I was on fire.
Wow. That's quite a while.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm so sorry you went through that. And the recovery process must have been quite an ordeal.
It really was, because like I was saying, my brothers were there, and my brother Jason, when he was the one that lit it, so he got a little bit of burn on his hand from when the initial flashover happened. But my brother Ryan, he ended up having to go to the hospital because he got a little bit of burns. Not a little bit. He got a decent amount of little burns on his arm, and so he ended up having to go to the hospital. But he was saying, like, once the fire was out, like, just the core of my chest was like glowing red, like an ember, like Rudolph's nose kind of thing. So
Oh my gosh.
I try and like think back to those particular time frames, but just the trauma is
Yeah.
just so immense that I just can't remember.
Yeah. 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 And I don't want you to dip into anything that would, kind of bite you, because I'll do that too. Sometimes you can find memories if you go too far deep. And then, yeah. Anyways, moving on. I appreciate you sharing that part because I know it must be painful to walk through. May I ask how the recovery process started and kind of what that looked like for you at such a young age?
So the recovery process, what that actually started with was a medically induced coma, just because, kind of piggybacking off the last part. There was a lot of damage. The body, essentially, the way that I've had it explained to me is, I had to be essentially put into like safe mode, like what Windows computers, would be essentially. And to do that, that would be putting you into a coma, just to manage that pain tolerance and whatnot. And,
Yeah.
the coma portion was really difficult. I think that the difficult portion was the coming back and forth between reality and knowing that something has changed and just not understanding
Yeah.
what exactly changed.
Right.
But not only do you have those thoughts, like your reality is like coming and going like the ocean tide, and it's just like every
Yeah.
time you come to, something's completely different.
Yeah. And you're kind of scrambling to understand what's going on. So every time you like come to, you're just quickly putting the pieces together as best you can, but then you maybe didn't put them together the right way, or you know what I mean? Like it's
Because after a while, you don't even realize, like, you could be listening to somebody talk and then doze off, come back, hear somebody talk and think that, oh,
Yeah.
well, I just dozed right off. But it could have been 5 minutes. It could have been 5 days. It could have been a week,
Yeah.
and you just happen to be coming back around and hearing somebody talk again, or it could have
Wow.
literally just been that 5 minutes. But having that loss of reality in your own consciousness was a very difficult process to go. And I had that for a while, because even after the coma side of it, then there was the pain management side of it, because they had me heavily sedated for a long, long time. So again, it was the coming and the going. And after a while, it wasn't even the physical pain that was really the hard part. It was the mental side, because it's like, you just can't get up and go do things, like
Right.
you're comatose and in the same spot for a long time.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and after a while, that really gets your mind like jammed up,
Yeah. I bet. And beds aren't comfortable. That's the thing. I think some people think that like being in a bed for like a month would be like, oh, I'm just gonna hang out. Those beds are not comfortable. You end up with bed sores. You end up, that's why you got your turn teams coming in. They're manipulating you all the time. Another thing that I found stressful about medical care is when you're injured that much and you're not really in the conversation for the care, everyone else is managing what's happening to you. And you don't get to be part of the conversation. So it's really kind of an odd thing. I hope you had great people in your corner at that moment that were
I had the best. I'm not gonna
great.
lie. I had the
Great.
absolute best. So when my initial accident happened, I went directly to, man, I can't remember the name of it, but it's the burn center that's in Las Vegas.
Okay.
And they stabilized me pretty much. And then I went to Shriners in Galveston.
Okay.
And for anyone who doesn't know anything about Shriners, they're an absolute angel group. Like, it is literally, they will give medical treatment to children that need it for no cost.
Yeah.
And in my case, that was substantial. Like, that was
Yeah.
huge. Not just that, though, they happen to have been one of the top pediatric burn centers in the United States. So I had top-notch care with them to get some of my big initial surgeries done. But when I eventually came back home to Washington State, because that's where my whole family's from, I was in Harborview, and Harborview is a learning hospital. So it's a university attached to the hospital. And so I got a lot of cutting edge stuff that was being tested in the early 90s and whatnot. And a lot of it worked, a lot of it didn't work. But the doctors that I had were top notch. Dr. Ingraf, he was this little German guy. I absolutely loved him, but he was one of the top plastic surgeons in the United States for burns and whatnot. So yeah, I actually had really good doctors.
That's awesome. And you probably never actually, I was going to ask something to the effect of what age do you think it was when you kind of decided, you know what, I'm going to do what I want to do anyways? How did you go from being a burn victim to be I'm going to face the fire? You know what I mean? Literally become a firefighter. Did that start somewhere else small? You're going to help the next person who's burned and then it grew? Or how did that process go of moving forward? Yeah.
That's a really good question. Honestly, I know where the seed was planted. I know exactly where it was planted because it was planted by one of my very first mentors, and his name was Roger. And Roger was an archery instructor at the summer camp that I went to as a kid for burn survivors. And Roger was not like any of the staff member. He brought a group of other people together that put all the archery stuff together for camp. But he had done it for many, many years. He was there for already 15 years or so by the time I showed up to camp in the early 90s. But it was the second summer. No, it was the first summer after my accident that had happened. So we'd gone through a whole season practically, and then it was next summer. And I remember I went to summer camp, and I wasn't quite sure, what I was going to be like at all.
Right.
My burns were still fairly fresh. I couldn't stay in the sun very long because it was really bad on my skin. But I just jumped right into the rhythm of camp. It was something that, just really spoke to me. And I remember we went to archery, and I was watching all of my cabin mates and all the other kids shooting archery, and I really wanted to do it. I was 7 years old at the time. What 7-year-old boy doesn't want to shoot archery, right? And so I was really bummed out because I couldn't even hold the bow, let alone, try and pull the drawstring back or anything like that. Right. And so I was sitting off to the side, and Roger, he's like, "Hey, you want to do archery?" And I told him, I can't. And he's like, "Well, I bet you can if you try." And so I just went along with it. And I was like, "Okay, well, what do you think we should do?" And so he got a grocery bag, and he made me grab the bow with one hand and then put the grocery bag over my hand and then duct tape the bow to my hand. So now I could hold the bow, right?
Yeah.
And then after I was able to actually hold the bow, he loaded arrows up, and then the next thing you know, I'm shooting arrows downrange. But what that did for me at that moment was, without him having to even say it, was whatever it is that you want to do, you can do it. You may have to do it a little differently than other people, but that's fine. As long as you still find a way to accomplish the task the same way, what does it matter? Right. Yeah. And that was that I learned that at 7 years old. And that particular lesson has been utilized throughout my entire life. That's what got me into firefighting. I knew I could do the firefighting stuff. I had a lot of people that didn't think I could.
Hmm.
But it was just, I did things a little bit differently than other people did, but I still got the same result, still did the same exact things everyone else needed to get done. And that was just one of the many lessons that guy taught me, and I've also had other mentors that are like him as well that have taught me other things like that too.
Yeah. It is funny that like the biggest limiter sometimes in our lives is ourselves or
Mhm.
the real estate between our ears, and if you
Yeah,
adjust that, the world changes, impossibilities become possible. That's amazing. And for that gentleman to bestow that kind of on you, be like, why aren't you doing it? And you're like, I can't. And you're like, he's like, I bet you could if you really tried. You know what I mean? So that like, wow, what a lesson. It makes me want to put my hands up like this. You know what I mean? Like, I hope that person is gets to hear this, because that's an amazing, amazing thing. And you've probably taught that to numerous people. That's probably the top thing you teach people is like, you're your biggest limiting factor,
the greatest battlefield you will ever experience is right here.
Yeah.
Like that is the most difficult place, because the most convincing person that will ever convince you of anything resides in here, right?
Yes,
And
sir.
so depending on how they're armed, if it's positive or negative, is going to really kind of determine your outcome, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I've said on here many times, if you go out in the world and you're looking for bad things, you'll find them. If you go out in the world and you're looking for good things and opportunities to help and serve, you can find those too. It just depends what pair of glasses you got on that day. And I'm
Exactly.
and I'm guilty of that too. I'll have a bad day
Oh
and
yeah.
I'll put the bad day glasses on and like and I end up in like of course day.
Yeah.
Of course this happened. Of course this happened. But I've realized like, over a long process, that's sort of like a muscle, you know what I mean? Or it's a skill, you have to practice it because,
100%.
and the only way you learn is by getting in the situations. And although the
Exactly.
situations can be painful, they teach you a lot. And
Exactly.
that's hard.
Exactly.
That's hard to get to, because especially when everything seems like a fight for so long, like it must have done for you. It's like, I don't know if I want to, I mean, you get tired, but then you get back
Yeah.
up. Yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that is a really important thing to bring up, because one of the biggest lies that we tell ourselves, and I just made a video on this here recently, is like one of the biggest lies that we tell ourselves is that we have to be strong all the time, that we have to carry the weight all the time, that we have to do all of these things. It's okay to be tired, like
Yeah.
the analogy that I used in this video was, when a ship is depleted, what does it do? It goes back to the harbor to refuel, to restock, to rest. So it can do what? Get back out to the ocean. The harbor is not the destination. You don't stay there forever, but you do have to appear there every once in a while, because that's just the way the nature works, and we're the same way,
Yeah.
It's a daily choice, like going to the gym, right? Going to the
Yeah.
gym is a choice. You have to make that choice to do that. It's not like you just magically wake up and your feet take you there.
I wish.
You do that. I know, right? But you have to make that choice to do that. And every day you have to make that choice to have that mental fortitude to say, you know what, today's going to be a good day, instead
Yeah.
of, today's going to be a shitty day. It's really how you started off. What you say is it's power, and you will create it. We're creators in that sense.
Yeah. For sure. For sure. You know, I stayed in a state of kind of like victimhood for a while after I got shot and then I got fired and all that kind of stuff. And it came with some hard lessons. I had to get sober. And, I realized that the only person who could get me sober was me. But that takes a bit, what I mean? It takes a bit to kind of like realize and put together. Kind of forgot where I was going with that question, but I mean, I did get shot in the head. So you have to forgive me.
No, I think that's a really important thing to bring up, though, like that victimhood thing, right? Because like I myself, I got kind of stuck in that for a little bit at first too. But I think what's really an amazing part of our journey is when you actually graduate that victimhood and you have that deja vu or that epiphany, whatever you want to call it, to where you're just like, oh, all right, cool. Now you shift gears and then off you go, right? Because in my opinion, I think there's 3 stages of this whole setup, and this is for everybody, right? We have the victimhood, and that's whenever your trauma happens, that's where you start. Everybody starts there. So there's no shame in actually being a part of the victimhood as long as you don't reside there, right? Like you absorb it, be a part of it. It's part of the process. But then once you get to that next step, then you become a survivor, right? You pick up the pieces and realize, well, okay, this happened, and well, we're going to move forward and we're going to just kind of keep doing our thing. But then you have what I call the thriver mode. And that's kind of where we kind of sit at in our situations, right? It's where we pick up the pieces and realize, you know what? Not only can I put this back together, but I can put this back together in such a way that it not only makes myself better, but it makes those around me better as well.
Yeah.
So this way, my healing could be communal instead of just individual.
Yeah.
That to me is that thriver mode. And that's where I think everyone should really strive to. But what's difficult is getting out of that survivor mode sometimes. And that's where things like addictions can really come into play, right? Like in the burn community, addiction is a huge problem because pain management. You know, what happens is when you get taken off of pain management, but your pain's still there, right? You're going to find ways to dull that.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's a huge thing. There's lots of different, lots of fires on that front alone to put out, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately. But I've been there, you know what I mean? Where I needed to I felt like I had to find an earthly thing to plug the hole or the pain or use as a bandage and that sort of thing. And yeah, I got trapped in there for quite a while. And you're right with the victim mentality. I'm glad that you at least could say that you were there for a little bit, because for a long time I thought I was, even when I came out of it, I was ashamed that I had been there for so long. So you were saying even before that, you're like, we need to be gracious enough to give ourselves rest, you know? And I just keep thinking of that because like, I know when I was coming back to the harbor to refuel, I labeled it as failing, that I was weak, that I was not strong enough. The boat wasn't strong enough. The captain didn't know where he was going, like all this kinds of stuff. But it's hard to give yourself that grace, but it's super important. And I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I get stuck in that too often. You know, it's just like, go, go, go. Why isn't it working? Why isn't it working? Push harder. You know what I mean? Push harder, push, like you would in the gym. But sometimes you got to be able to kind of like retreat, and you've got to be able to, refuel, well, exactly like you said.
I mean, and when you think about it, I mean, nature even has it the right way, you know, it's got a sunrise and a sunset, you know, it's got the tides that come in and out, you know, it's got the seasons. It demonstrates restoration, repair, and rejuvenation every which way you look, you know what I mean? And so it's like, we are of nature. We have to follow the same patterns. Like, we can't differentiate ourselves from that, because when we do, that's when we really start to mess ourselves up, you know?
Well said.
At least within our own mental health. Then once your mental health starts to decline, you know, a lot of things start declining afterwards.
Yeah. I also found myself in situations where I was, you know, reminiscing or going over resentments, if you will, a lot, and was then projecting into the future and creating anxiety and fear about what was going to happen. So I had to really kind of tune it into this moment right here, right now. Can you relate to that at all? Was that part of the journey?
You know, for me, the thing that I struggled with the biggest, to be honest with you, was bullying. The bullying didn't start right away, because I started first grade all the way through graduation as a burn survivor. And it didn't start right away, but it started in about middle school, really bad. It is when it got really, really bad. And I just couldn't understand how somebody would make fun of me in my situation. Like, I think to myself, I just like, you know, man, like if they just understood what it is that I went through, you know, the surgeries, the different things, like, would they continue to make fun of me? And I'd ask myself this all the time. I would just, you know, constantly beat myself up. Like, well, you know, maybe these guys are right. Maybe I'm a monster. Maybe I'm this or whatever. And for a long time, I bought that. And it gave me a lot of anxiety of just going out into public, because it was just like whenever I saw somebody staring at me, it was always the worst possible scenario. Like, they
Yeah.
probably think I'm a monster. They probably think this, that. And it was a lot of self-negative projection. But it was interesting because what shifted for me, and this took years to come to this, is that because for years I asked myself that question of why do they do this? Why do they do this? Because the doctors and the nurses, they understood. My family, they understood, but the rest of the world, they didn't. They just knew that I was different. And till one day I was literally asking myself the same exact question that I had asked myself for years of like, would they do this if they understood? And it clicked. Like I had somehow asked myself the question that I was wanting everybody else to answer. And it finally like dawned on me of like, wow, actually, I am actually kind of amazing. And it wasn't like in a boastful ego way. It
Right.
was the knowledge of like, wow, the surgeries that I have been through, the things
Yeah.
that the brushes with death, just the crazy amounts of things that I've survived. Like I
The
came online
pain.
to my own realization of like how incredible it was to be who I was and where I was at that time.
Awesome.
And what that did for me was that actually really kind of reeled in everything that I had given over to other people as far as like their opinions of myself,
Right.
and then pulled that back to myself. I didn't care about
Nice.
anybody else's opinion. Then that really took out all of that aspect of like people staring at me in public, all of that anxiety, it just completely disappeared.
That's amazing. And it all came from a choice. It all came from your choice, and that's so amazing that we have the capacity to do that. Is it hard? It is tremendously hard to walk through that. But when it finally clicks and you realize that you're amazing because you didn't give up, even just that, like that's freaking skyrockets everything. And
It is the
really,
hardest
yeah.
thing you will ever do. It is the hardest thing you will ever do. But,
Because I used
what
to
is that
think
thing?
for people. I don't know if you ever did that, but I would think for people. And I would think they saw me the way I felt about myself, which was shameful, dirty, different, weak, like not manly or something like that. And I would almost already be coming up with a rebuttal and wanting to, like, they haven't said anything. I just believe they were looking at me for a moment. Now I think what they're thinking is I'm weak. I remember, or this guy's, blah, 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 blah. And I'm ready to snap on this person over the thoughts that I'm having, which are creating real emotions,
Yep.
and your brain can't tell the difference between the story you're making up and the emotions attached or a real story and the emotions attached to that. They hurt just the same.
And it creates that knot in your chest, and then
Yeah.
then it's a domino effect of different things, and eventually you just freeze.
Yeah, because you start going into confirmation mode. You start looking around. You're like, am I a pile of trash? Well, that says I'm a pile of trash. What's the next thing? That's a pile of trash. That's a pile of trash. That's a pile of trash. I must be a pile of trash. But all I'm looking for are piles of trash. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not looking at the things that make me different as a blessing or an advantage, the things I've been. You get what I'm saying? I know you do, eventually, because you went on to be a firefighter. And I mean, because being a police officer, I can just only imagine the first day of the academy, people might have given you some weird looks, but by the end of the academy, you're a brother. So, what I mean? Can you talk about that at all?
Oh, most certainly, man. I love talking about this. This was one of my favorite things. First and foremost, my Uncle Terry, who I was named after, was a police officer. He was a sheriff down in LA County for like 35 years, something like that.
Dang.
And I was named after him. And as soon as I told him I was getting into fire academy, he's like, "What? Why would you join the fire department? Why would you go do such a thing like that?" I was like, "Well, Uncle Terry, because even cops need heroes."
That was a good response.
Oh man, I tell you what. For me, the firefighting thing was honestly spite, man. I had to find, it was my essential, proverbial going to a new school, finding the biggest kid, and then like laying them out, so that way nobody else messes with you. I just got sick and tired, man, of getting the victim card. People would just look at me and just be like, you poor Terry, poor Terry.
Yeah.
And then one day I went and applied to become an oil technician at a local car oil place. And like for me, I'm mechanically inclined. I can work on cars all day long. So like changing oil, it's a drop in the bucket, whatever. And this manager that was there at this shop, he's like, I can't hire you because you'd just be a liability. And it just, for some reason, it flipped the switch that was in my brain. And I was just like, okay, this is it. Like, I can either let the world just keep rolling me like this, and it's going to keep doing it, or I need to find something that I can do that is just going to completely just set people off to the side and just stop doing this to me. And I was sitting at home one night and later that night actually, and I was like, what is it that I can do? And then a friend of mine was like, hey, there's some local firefighter volunteer tryouts coming up. And I was like, that's it, that's the game. And I went honestly just as a joke. I honestly went as a joke. I was like, haha, this would be funny, I could be the next fire marshal Bill, whatever.
Yeah.
And I went, took the written test. I passed the written test. But I'll tell you what, when I showed up for the written test, everyone was like, dude, you know where you're at exactly.
That's awesome, though. That's awesome.
But once I actually got all the way through the written test, of course, I had to go to the physical, not like the actual like physical agility test, but like the medical physical, right?
Right.
And so that was my first real big hurdle. So as soon as I went in to see the doctor there, the doctor straight up looked at me and he's like, no, dude, there's just no way. Like, and I mean, I kind of expected it, but there was just this spite that was still inside me at the time to where I was a little jaded because this guy was a sports doctor and he had no professional, like, legitimacy at all for burns, so I was just like, well, you don't really know burns.
Right.
You can't necessarily make that qualification yourself as a medical doctor. So I went straight to the headquarters and I talked to the battalion chief, right? And he straight up told me, he's like, hey, if you can write your name with a pen and you can pass the CPAT and pass academy, then I'll let you in. And I was just like, well, damn. All right, cool. And so when it came time to go to, yeah, right, exactly. Like, not only did I write my name with a pen, I did it in cursive, man.
Yeah.
But come to find out, and this came from him, like the most important places to off gas your heat from your body is the top of your head, the neck, the armpits, your groin, and the bottom of your feet. Believe it or not, as long as you have those places, like your body can almost appropriately dissipate heat naturally. And so for me, I'm great in all those places. So I got passed and then I went to the CPAT. Now this is where everybody gets filtered out. And I'm pretty sure this is where most people thought I was going to get filtered out. And that's the candidate physical agility test. And it's 8 stations that are mimicking real firefighter scenarios. And you have like 10 minutes and 20 seconds to finish it. Most people fail in the first station, which, I mean, you're pretty familiar with like the stair stepper, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what they start you with. And then they try and murder you the rest of the way through. But the first time I went, to be honest with you, I didn't even finish the course. Like I trained for it. I just didn't know how much training it was going to take. Like I was way under trained. And you get 3 attempts in one season to do it. So I went back the second time after training for a couple weeks and I missed it by 4 seconds. My pants kept falling off, like, cause the drawstring broke literally right before my run.
No.
And so I kept losing my pants, and you have to have your hands in order to like carry chainsaws and dummies and stuff like that. So I missed it by like 4 seconds. But I came back the third time and I just completely obliterated it. I pretty much wore spandex the entire way through.
Nice.
But I passed it. I actually set one of the fastest records that season. And then we went into academy and did academy for the 12 weeks. And I'll tell you what, and I know you'll understand this, like, and when you get to train with people like that, and you realize like the kind of training you're taking, but it's also like that these are people that I know I can count on my life being in their hands kind of training. That totally changed me a young man. It really gave me the structure and responsibility I needed. So I went into this whole thing with the mindset of like just giving the world the double finger, but really came out of it with like a solid like mindset of like responsibility of being an adult,
Yeah.
because you had to be being in that position.
Yeah, absolutely. And it must have felt good to finish that and really put the middle finger up, to the
Oh yeah.
fire, if anything. Be like, you don't control me,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, it was the best. I'll tell you what, when I started learning to drive the engine, sitting at stoplights and stuff like that, it was the best thing because people would give me that look like either this guy's really good at his job or this guy really sucks at his job.
That's
So
funny.
but it was really cool. It was a great experience. And then, also being able to share that with working with kids at summer camp,
Yeah.
to show them that, it's like, dude, you guys can go out and do anything you want. And it was actually quite humbling because I've had a few kids that have done graduated other programs and went on to be firefighters. And I was,
That's awesome.
so it was an inspiration of seeing me do it. So I was just like, dude, that's awesome.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah. Fighting back.
Right.
Spite works sometimes. If you're like,
Dude,
you know what?
Spite is a hell of a fuel.
Yeah.
It really is.
It's
It really, just as long as you don't run it all the time, you don't want to use that as your primary source of fuel all the time, man.
Right. Absolutely. Totally agree. But when you have someone put a limit on you, and then that first reaction is that lion heart, like, okay, you say I can't do it. I'm gonna show you I can. You know what I mean?
My dad learned how that reverse psychology worked with me as a kid, and he used that to his advantage.
Yeah. That's funny. Now you became a firefighter and you were one for quite a bit, but I understand that maybe someone came into your life and said, wow, you're amazing. You could maybe talk to more people about that. Is that true?
So in some senses, yeah, I was doing my whole stint with the fire department, volunteer, and I was given the opportunity to actually go work full time with a nonprofit, working with burn children from all across the country and sometimes internationally. And I was actually looking at working my ways, taking over as CEO, because the CEO of that organization also happened to have been a mentor of mine from when I was a younger child as well. And he ran a summer camp that I went to and stuff like that. So I was like, you know what? Okay, I'll go ahead and lay down the fire department stuff and I'll come, run this whole thing with you. And yeah, that'd be great, and trade it on. And it was great. I got to go and run summer camps and I got to go and work with kids from all over the country and go do all sorts of cool like fundraising and program stuff for them and whatnot. However, that whole thing for me, unfortunately, is what would actually end up leading me towards one of the biggest depressions I've ever had in my life, because that actually turned into a scenario where there was a misunderstanding within myself and the CEO. And because of that misunderstanding, like he totally jumped the gun without actually coming to the table and talking about anything. And essentially what it boiled down to is like he just kind of cut everything off. He asked me to build like a program because if I was going to be CEO, he's like, build a program, something that can benefit the organization. I built a program and I was going to actually use it to benefit not just that organization, but other organizations that work with burn children as well. And it was like a program to, connect the firefighters who actually did the saving with the children that they saved.
Wow.
So it was a two kind of program. He took it as that I was trying to start an entirely new camp underneath him and like completely went like ballistic on me. And so pretty much overnight, a 19-year relationship and mentorship just completely ceased to exist. And so it really threw me into a depression because not only did I lose that, but I had also put down my firefighting that I worked so hard to get into. I had moved myself across town, or not just town, but across the state. So I was in a completely unknown place to myself. It actually started me on a 10-year depression.
Wow.
I had. And I'll tell you what, that by itself was quite a journey that I've learned a lot of things from. And it was pretty much most of my 30s.
Yeah. Well, if you don't mind, let's talk about that because I know a lot of people can relate to things like that. For me, depression becomes self-isolating. It becomes pretty much just wanting to be alone, not wanting to be messed with, no motivation to do much, especially not to get out and socialize or anything like that. I pretty much just turn into a stone and say,
You
don't
don't even
mess.
want to be with yourself,
Well said. Well said. Well said. So those are the kind of feelings you were going through for a while.
Oh man, I was in the thick of it for a long time. What I really turned myself towards was like cannabis and just to get stoned and just like completely just, be gone. That was the only thing that helped me through a lot of that for a long time. And then of course after that it was, having to go get work and get employment while still trying to figure out this whole depression thing. Because what it was for me is it wasn't just a depression; it was a complete loss of identity.
Yeah.
I put so much of myself into the firefighting, then which also kind of went directly into the organization that I was working with. And not just that, like a 19-year mentor, someone that, you thought you knew, and then all of a sudden is just gone. So it's like,
That hurts. That hurts. I mean, any relationship that it can evaporate suddenly that's been around for a long time. Especially, it sounded like you had good intent. You're trying to help children. This is about burn victims, and then for whatever reason, it didn't land in that other person's lap properly. That's shocking, and that's a letdown too. Because it's like it makes me think, well, what was all the other stuff? Like if you can suddenly turn on me in this moment. Were you bullshitting me the whole time? And we do that to ourselves. I've learned that I'm like my biggest torturer. I think the rest of the world is against me, but it's actually me picking up all the things from the world and playing with it and analyzing it. And this must mean this. And if they did this, they must be thinking this because I think that they're thinking the way I think. One of the biggest things I had to do is realize that not everyone is thinking the way that I am. They don't have the same morals. They don't have the same worldview. They don't have the same codes. And it hurts because especially when you think someone's trying to hurt you when you would never do that because it's not in your character, you're trying to understand, why is this person doing this? Like and then you can even turn on yourself and be like, what's wrong with me? And can you relate? Was that kind of what was going on too?
Yeah. Oh yeah. No. I did that a lot back and forth.
And you're right. It's like a swing. Like you keep playing with it and agitating it.
And you'll play out the entire scenario in your head.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's multiple scenarios, and you'll play an entire scenario through your head. Then you'll replay it just to make sure that you played it properly in your head.
Yep.
Like, could I maybe misinterpreted it? So that kind of mental cycle is what really I got caught up in for so long.
Yeah.
The only thing that was keeping me anything functional was literally work.
Okay.
I was working at a call center of all places in the telecommunications field. And it was one of those things that when I was working there, one day on one of my breaks, I remember I was scrolling on my phone and I saw somebody doing like spray paint art, like, what you see people do on the sidewalks and stuff like that when you're on vacation. I don't know what it was, man, but this was like kind of near the tail end of that 10 years of really struggling and having so many different journeys in between. But when I saw that, something like switched on in my brain and I was just like, hey, that's really cool. And by the end of the day, I had gone to the store and bought all the stuff to do spray paint art. It was all cheap stuff, but I started. And I'll tell you what, that is literally what put color back into my world. Many years of struggling with such a crazy depression. When I figured out that I was artistically somewhat able to do things, it was like almost 9 months solid. If I wasn't working or sleeping, I was doing something art related.
Wow.
And that's honestly what really pulled me out of my depression. It was art. It really saved my life.
Wow.
Matter of fact, I've always got some kind of little doodle thing going on right now.
Very cool.
Yeah, this is just some little thing that I'm trying to make sure.
Little alien guy.
Yeah, right. It's just like play around with things. And the thing that's awesome is that I also found through my art is that I'm color deficient. I'm not color blind. I can see colors. I just can't see all colors. So I actually learned a lot about myself as an artist, and that I get to view things differently in this world as far as colors go.
Yeah.
But the big thing is from all of that is like, even in the worst of depression, like the biggest thing to always remember is like there is a way out, and just like every season has its end. I mean, my season was 10-year
Yeah.
season is a long time, right?
It's a very
But I
long
mean,
time.
when I really look at the results of that 10 years, there's a lot of lessons to be pulled out of that. There's a
Yeah.
lot of things from that 10 years that I would have never have learned otherwise,
Yeah.
and so I'm grateful to be able to see it that way. But yeah, depression is a hell of a thing, man. And
Yeah.
it flares its head up every once in a while, but I think we all kind of have experienced that.
Yeah. It's always been something I wish I could take it out and show to someone. Like if they're like, what's wrong with you? I could be like, look. And they're like, oh, I see what you're dealing with. Never mind. You know what I mean? Like my PTSD, like people look at me, they're like, you're fine. I'm like, look at my head. You know what I mean? Like this is what's happening. Like all day, just thoughts of how things are going to go wrong, where the person's going to come with the gun, what I'm going to do, where the fatal funnel is, where's my you know what I mean? Like just stories just running, and it's my brain trying to keep me safe, which is
Yep.
so
And
I
I try to tell people, it's like, the one thing you have to understand about trauma is that the way that I look, you can see my trauma. When you see me, you automatically like, okay, wow, this guy has definitely seen a thing or two. He's been a place or two. And you can see that, right? Now, imagine like most people with PTSD, the way I look on the outside is how they look on the inside. And to have that comparison is really powerful for people to understand because, when you do look at somebody who looks normal and you can't understand, like, why can't you emotionally regulate this situation? Or why do you
yeah,
have an issue going to this place? Or why does that trigger you? I mean,
right,
when you stop and you think about it, like, internally, what that's always my first go-to nowadays is like, wow, okay, what's going on in their head that, maybe they're struggling with something right now,
yeah,
and it always puts me in the position of like, how can I best suit myself to maybe help them if I can,
right,
instead of trying to push them away, because
right.
that's not the way to do it.
Yeah, that becomes like a superpower when you realize that you have to meet people on their field or their home, their turf. You know what I mean? And even if they're angry, you just need to let them talk. Because if they get it out and you can say, I hear you, you don't have to say yay or nay, but like, I hear you. And I can understand maybe why you're feeling those feelings. It's very validating. You know what I mean? Because for the person who's saying it, they've been thinking this for a long, long, long time. So it's helpful. I think therapy is helpful, not because I've been instructed how to think or what to do. It's because I say my craziness out loud and then I'm the one who even catches it. I'm like, whoa, that sounds a little extreme. I think what I meant to say was this, so you kind of get to know yourself. But it's almost like the last 10 years after I got shot, I almost had to go through the process of emotionally growing up again. It felt like that. It felt like a fresh start. Everything was just raw, and I was super sensitive to anything going on around me, looks, people, situations,
One of the things you have to also think of too, right? And this is something I've run across with working with adults as well as working with children, but is that when a child sustains some sort of trauma, like myself, for example, right? And children bounce right back if you put them in the right environment, right? You give them the
Mhm.
right environment, they're just going to continue to be children. And I've seen that to be the case with some of the most extreme burns that I have ever seen. Adults, on the other hand, when something happens to you as an adult, right, your prefrontal cortex is probably already fully developed. Your brain has already rooted itself like the tree that it is in your own life. Now, when something traumatic happens, all of a sudden there is now a cascade of different problems. Work, home, relationships, all sorts of responsibilities that you have as an adult. You have commitments, you have all these things, right? And then
Mhm.
instantly when something bad happens, so like for example, in your case, work stopped, life stopped, everything stopped, right? But in your mind, you are the kind of person like you're a police officer. So I'm assuming that like all your days are structured, like you have
Mm.
everything planned out. And like when you get them done, like hoorah, that is the best part of your day, right? Now all of a sudden that has ceased, right? But your brain can't necessarily pull all of those different little like red flags out at once and say, hey, all of these are an issue. So instead it's, oh my goodness, sorry. I was going somewhere with that. My ADHD totally took off with it.
I've got it too. So yeah.
Oh man. But no, it's one of those things that, dang it, and it went right again. I had it and then I just took off again. I love that part of ADHD, man. And then the worst part of it too, man, is I'll be laying down, get ready to go to sleep, and then I'll remember it. Be like, oh yeah.
Yeah. Or like the next day. Yeah. In the middle of a conversation, in the middle of a different conversation, I'm like, oh, that thing from yesterday. And then I'll lose.
But that's what it was. So, yeah. But as adults, we tend to struggle more. We struggle a lot more in the terms of recovery. So, I mean, that makes sense as to where anxiety comes into play, anger comes into play.
Yeah.
There's a lot of internal confusion, right? Your systems are completely offline and completely in chaos, right? Like, and so like you've got misfires going on all over the place. And now you've also got just too many things for the psyche to keep in track. So to have those particular reactions, I think is completely understandable. And where I think the best thing that you can have in place for that is what is called a good natural support system.
Okay.
You had mentioned that your wife was a very key figure in getting you through all of this process, right? That's your natural support system, the people around you, the people that are going to take care of you when you can't do it yourself, right? Because let's just admit it, sometimes that happens. Sometimes we have to come to the realization that we need to let other people help us because we just can't do it ourselves.
Exactly.
I've had to come to that realization so many times, and sometimes it really sucks, especially if you're an independent person.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it is tough giving over that control and the feelings you have about it. And, when someone else is wiping your butt, it's not a great feeling.
And especially as a man, right? Like, let's just be honest about that, especially as a man, because like that's part of a key thing of being a man, being strong, being able to take care of yourself, and to have to give somebody that kind of control sometimes can be. Sometimes it can be emasculating, but the fact of the matter is like, it's still for your better good. And when you come to realize that, you still just go through the whole process.
I many times was like, believed I was the biggest problem in the world. So I'd look at the people who loved me and be like, why? You know what I mean? Like, what are you doing? I'm like, I would even tell my wife, why haven't you left yet? You know what I mean? She's like, for better or worse. And I'm like, and now I look back at that, I'm like, oh my gosh, you know what I mean? Like because I can relate to, you don't even know what's going on. Like my brain was in such disarray that you're saying multiple things are happening at the same time and you're swinging between like extremes. So I would be like, okay for a bit, and then I'd get triggered. I'd go really kind of like, I'd meet a situation that called for a 3 out of 10. And then I would get mad with myself because I knew I overreacted. So, I'm doing this kind of like up and down, like, why am I broken? And then I start getting better. I'm like, well, maybe I could do this. Maybe I could do this. And I get triggered in something stupid, like an old lady. Actually, someone cuts me off. I'm in my big truck and I'm so offended by it that I think I need to drive all the way up their butt, then come up next to them and like look at them at the stoplight. And you know who it ends up being? Like a little old lady. And you're just like, and then you just like collapse inside. Like I just chased down a little old lady over getting cut off. I'm in this enormous truck. She wouldn't have done anything to me. I'm just mad with someone getting in my way because I'm trying to go from one thing to another. Anything in the middle gets destroyed. And that's a tough way to live because when you're always emotionally activated, it's exhausting. I mean, it is. And that's the only way I ended up coming to terms with like, I need to change this because I could tell that I was destroying myself. I'd also end up in resentments a lot, well, if not for this person and blah, 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 blah. And then I'd go start creating the stories, running through the stories. How could I change the story? What could I have done to protect myself? What could I have said? What would I do in this situation? What will I do if I see them again? What will I do if I see their family? You know what I mean? So you're spinning all these wheels. And it's out of fear. It's out of trying to protect yourself and you're almost trying to outthink it. You know what I mean? Because physically you can't do it in that moment. So you're like trying to outthink it, but it's hard. It's very tough.
One of the things that really also helped me through some of that, and I mean, And I'm not gonna lie, I still have days to where sometimes that kind of thought process does creep in. Like, and when you've had that kind of a thought process before and you've had it for any length of time, like it is an old friend and it will come back to say hello every once in a while.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things that has helped me through it though, is philosophy, Stoicism,
Oh, yeah.
the idea of, I am not what has happened to me, but I am what I choose to become after the
Yeah.
fact. I don't have control of everything out here, but I can have control of everything that's in here. You know,
That one really got me because part of that one is like you can even lose control of your body. It like says it in one of those, like you can lose control of everything in this world, your possessions, your home, whatever it is. Even your body can be taken because you could be incarcerated, you could be paralyzed, you could be all these kinds of things. But the one thing that is yours is your
is your
mind.
mind.
Yeah.
If you don't mind me telling you a little bit of a story, one of
Please.
my surgeries that I've had that really kind of is a balancing stone for myself. And what I mean by balancing stone is this is one of the things that I always think about whenever like situations get to be like really rough. And I always think to myself, well, things could always be worse. One of the things about being a burn survivor and having burns in your face is that your eyelids themselves, they're super thin as far as skin goes. And whenever you have any kind of fire near your face like that, it's like throwing tissue paper in a bonfire. They just, they're gone, right?
Really?
Well,
Okay.
it's such a common thing in the burn community that the doctors are used to making new eyelids for people. I've had my eyelids remade. My eyes are super watery because of the pollen out here right now. So I'm not crying, I promise, but it does look like. But these eyelids are remade, and the way that they end up remaking the eyelid, they end up having to sew your eyes shut. And for
Wow.
me, my eyes were sewn shut for about a month and a half.
Whoa.
And that was done at 7 years old. And in that time frame, I will tell you what, there is nothing more mind numbing than being in a place like that. Cause like there's only so much one can sleep, right?
Yeah.
But I'd tell you one thing, the one thing that did give me out of that time though was the utmost appreciation and love for Bob Ross and Mr. Rogers because they played on the TV all the time.
Hmm.
Listening to Bob Ross doing his painting, I could actually like almost paint along with it in my own head, just listening to him during that time frame.
Yeah. I get it. The tone, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it was just, and you said, being in that state where you can't see anything. After a while, you're trying to stop yourself from thinking because you've run out of things to think about
To think about.
besides bad things. So you were saying like kind of being able to be there in the present, listening to that voice and it kind of guiding you through gave you some relief, which is very cool. I didn't believe in all that kind of stuff and until someone was like, you need to try meditating. I'm like, how in the heck am I going to meditate when I can't even sit here for 10 seconds? But then out of desperation, I tried it. And again, it's another thing that's like a muscle or a skill. It doesn't go well the first couple times, but you start and then when you kind of get the fruit, which is just a little bit of peace of mind or an extra second before a response, you're like, there is something to this. It's almost like magic. You're like, oh, I wish I would have done this earlier, but it is awkward when you're first starting. But yeah, being able to get to your mind, settle it, find a center. I do body scans. That helps me too, kind of get like back into my body. That's because if most of the time, if I'm stressed out, my mind is in the world. If I can bring it back in and kind of just get to my situation, which is more than enough, and just like stack gratitude. Stack gratitude really helps too, because it's hard to.
I'm so glad you say that.
Yeah.
That's actually my biggest secret weapon.
Yeah.
This is the thing that, a lot of people ask me is like, what is it? How are you so optimistic? Like, how are you so, just for your situation? Like, what is it? And, the answer is really simple. It's just homegrown. It is an attitude of gratitude,
Yeah.
100%. And the way that this works is it starts with a daily choice every single day. And it starts the moment you wake up. And I challenge people to always try this. Like, if you really want to see a difference in your life, like you have been mentally struggling and you are just tired of life feeling like it's kicking you, like, try this and try this for at least a couple of weeks. And I've not heard anybody say it hasn't worked for them. But the
Yeah.
moment you wake up, instead of picking up your phone and looking at your emails or what else, or social media or whatever the world is throwing at you, the first thing, just be thankful that you woke up. Because last night, a ton of people went to bed just like you did, and they did not wake up this morning. So their time is over, but you woke up. So number one, be grateful for that. When you get up and you put your feet on the floor, be grateful that you can feel the feet or feel the floor under your feet, because there's a lot of people out there that won't have that option today. And be thankful for the clothes that you have on your back, the food in your stomach, the roof over your head, that job that you're going to go to that helps provide this roof over your head.
Yeah.
And when you start doing this and you start your day with that attitude of gratitude, it literally tells your brain what you want, because we have to do that. We have to make that choice every single day. If we don't make that choice and we just go out into the world's going to tell us how our day is. And most of the time, we're not going to appreciate what that looks like, because the world isn't necessarily the best of all places, right?
Right.
So we have to be the orchestrators in our own band to say, hey, this is what we're doing today. This manifestation. This is the most successful people in the world do this all the time, and it makes the most difference. And I'm here to tell you, like, if you're sitting at the stoplight and you keep hitting all the stoplights across town, as you're sitting at a stoplight, like, find two things that are really pretty in your environment. Maybe it's the flowers that are growing off on the side of the road, or, maybe it's the way the clouds look up in the sky. Just look for the beautiful things in life, put your brain and your mind and your vibes in those directions. And then that's the way that life will treat you. Cause we have to tell life how to treat us sometimes.
Yeah.
The way that we treat ourselves is the way that life will end up treating us.
I finally bit into it because everyone's telling me stack gratitude. I'm like, you do your thing, I'll do my thing. And then when I actually ended up doing it, someone explained to me that depression and gratitude can't live in the same space. So like, you can't have a foot in both camps. And I'm like, really? And I tried it out of spite, kind of like you. And I'm like, and then it's really profound when you really mean it, when you're like, and my relationship with like a higher power is now God, Jesus. And that's just how I do it. But like, to actually pray on a hot day, be like, thank you, or at night, and just be like, thank you for this home. Thank you for this roof. Otherwise, I'd be outside right now, and if it's 100 degrees in Nevada, you probably have AC in your house, which is another huge blessing. And we live in comparison. I think I heard this too, like kings 100 years ago didn't even live the lives that we live now.
Not even close.
And we forget that. And
they still died of syphilis back then.
Yeah, that's really funny. And we forget. We were born into, the idea of here's a TV. TV is a miracle to someone 100 years ago, just like, really? The
very technology that most people are watching the podcasts on right now is way more technologically advanced than the spacecraft that took the original Apollo missions to the moon.
You're right.
It's such a crazy thing to think about.
So when you hear those things, it makes me go, okay. There are things that I'm taking for granted, that I have and that I'm taking for granted. And when you realize that you have more than you thought, it, for me, kind of does like a recalibration. Like there's like a wave of humility that comes through me. And I'm like, I need to, you know what I mean? Like if I'm not acting right, I'm kind of like, hey, it's time to act right. You know what I mean? Like you got to step up to the plate. Now, your life now involves you go around and you are serving those who've been through it when it comes to burns and whatnot. How are you doing that now? Is that through public speaking, books, all of the above, websites? How could someone maybe even reach you who needs your help if we could do that?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So, for me right now in my journey where I'm at is being really big into the push of like social media.
Okay.
I've got my channels on TikTok that I've been working on for like the last year.
Awesome.
It's Phoenix Down with Terry. It's actually named after my book. I'm currently writing a memoir of my story. I'm about 85% of the way done with it.
Nice.
Totally worth the journey. But my journey of where I'm at now is really just trying to get out there and share my story, because I do want to start some support groups for not just men's mental health, because I have a really big advocate in the terms of men's mental health.
Awesome.
Also, just people that are struggling just in general, be it burns, other kind of physical deformities, whatever it is that somebody feels like they could, extrapolate something from my story,
Hmm.
to be able to build some form of a platform to work with people like
Yeah.
that, be it on a group platform, individual basis. I do want to start doing a lot more like motivational speak.
Yeah.
I want to go to schools and talk to kids about bullying.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important topic that still needs to be touched on today.
100%. Because if those kids, like, for a second had someone look at them and be like, do you realize the pain that comes with going through a burn like that on, this percentage of your body? It almost equates to this. Could you do that? What have you been through? You know what I mean? Like,
Well,
yeah.
I've really I've kept a finger on the pulse of bullying state ads over the years, and bullying has gotten worse
Yeah.
from when I was younger, like way worse.
With
And it's
social
worse
media, does that kind
because
of,
social media emboldens it quite a bit. It gives it a whole nother level of platform, because it's easy to be a keyboard warrior, right? And
yep,
just be able to hide behind a screen.
yep,
And that's honestly one of the things that I believe, not enough people get punched in the mouth anymore for talking crap, because
yeah,
we're all behind screen.
yeah. It's like,
Sorry, a little old school in that thought, but the bullying aspect for me though is that the administrations don't do anything, and the parents of the bullies don't do anything, because usually that behavior stems from the parents, right? So
yeah,
you get no relief there.
right.
I did an article with CNN a handful of months ago. And I was just like, cool, okay, cool. You guys are going to throw it out on your page and whatnot. Well, what they didn't tell me is that they actually threw it on what was called CNN 10, which is actually shown through schools, like social studies class, about ninth grade range or whatever.
Cool.
It went like wildfire through all of the schools, and like all of these kids on my social media, like, hey, you the dude from, the video thing? And it was like, okay, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And like, I was thinking to myself, it was like, before all of that, I was like, I don't know if schools will really be, like a thing, because I don't know if they have the mental capacity to really comprehend what I'm trying to lay down. And then when that happened, it was just, I mean, still to this day, I still have kids that are like, hey, you the guy from CNN 10? And just like, yep, that's me.
That's
So,
awesome.
I've really kind of been working a plan towards going to schools, because you can't talk to the administrations, you can't talk to the bullies, you talk to the kids that are getting bullied, right? Like, that's the
Yeah,
way you do it. Equip them to emotionally, mentally, and spiritually overcome those situations. Because once you get kids to realize their self-worth, like who they are and what it is that they bring, and like the fact that they're amazing.
yeah,
Once they get that idea, or at least that seed planted, that's the beginning of it, right?
yeah,
And it'll take time to water it and keep working on it, but
yeah.
that's how we're gonna save our young kids, because like
Awesome.
I'm getting sick and tired of seeing all these different reports of, us losing our young kids due to
Yeah,
things that we could easily avoid.
yeah. Self-inflicted. And
Mm.
yeah, that's very, very sad. So anyone listening out there who can relate, yeah, let's get behind this guy and help him any way we can. Terry, you are a warrior, and I
Thank you.
commend you. I am honored to have met you. And if there's anything Shit Creek survivors could do for you in the future, you just let us know. I'm going to put all of your contact information into the bio so anyone listening can grab that info and reach out to Terry. He's going to have a book coming out, so I'm going to make sure I get a hold of one of those, because I mean, come on, man. This guy's a rock star. Any last burning desires, Terry? Any last words to give to the people?
Honestly, the biggest thing that I like to share with people, if I had any life advice to give anybody, and if anything that you take from today, just take this one thing. The greatest thing that you can do for yourself is to genuinely fall in love with yourself. And I'm not talking in the superficial, looking at yourselves thinking, I'm talking about the get into the dark places, work in the places that you don't necessarily like, actually get to sit with them and actually work with them and get them to be a part of your life. When you
Yeah.
fall in love with yourself on that level, it's amazing how life will start to unfold itself. It's just people start coming into your life that need to be there. The different parts of your life start blooming. It's just the greatest thing. So, and it takes time. It most certainly takes time. It's not an overnight thing. But as time goes on, you do notice that the blooming happens. And you just keep pushing it.
Beautiful. Well, thank you again, Terry. You're the man. Terry's story isn't about what he survived. It's about what he chose to do with it. He went from victim to survivor to thriver. And now he's using his experience to help other people find their way forward. If something Terry shared connected with you, let us know in the comments. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Shit Creek Survivors. We believe one thing. We all have a Shit Creek story. This is where you get to hear them. We'll see you next time.